Augie is no longer with us, and Bob Rizzo is been appointed in absence. Darrell Wozendowski.
Here.
TJ.
Here.
Pam.
Here.
Bruce. Here. And Ken.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, approval of the agenda.
I make the motion to approve the agenda as submitted for November 20th, 2017.
No second. All those in favor of approving the agenda, November 20th, 2017, as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. The agenda passes. Number 5, public comment. Ms. Cook.
Could you explain to me what happened? Last month, you guys passed a motion for private driveways and roads to go to the board. When I got to the board, it turned out to be private driveways and another motion for the engineering and another motion to go to the zoning board. And you guys didn't do any of that. I wonder how come somebody who doesn't live here, who has none of our experience of living here or anything, has the right to override your agenda, your motion. They added 2 more on and said, this has to be that way because it has to be put in the book. No one asked your permission to do that. And you weren't at the meeting to know? You don't know what I'm talking about.
The board meeting?
Yeah.
I can explain the process.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
So the planning commission is charged with the administration and reviewing and updating the zoning ordinance.
Yes.
The private road ordinance is a board ordinance. It's a legislative ordinance that doesn't go through.
Why do they have anything to do with it then if it belongs to the board? You're confusing the devil out of me. These people tell us what we can do, how we can live, what we can paint on our houses, and where we can put our fences. And now they can tell us what we did. They made this thing that says what we can do with our roads, providing the township board goes along with it all. All of a sudden, they came up with 2 extra motions that they never saw.
Right, so the planning commission doesn't have any jurisdiction over the private road ordinance. That's a standalone ordinance that's under the jurisdiction of the board. And so in order to do the update that the board was looking to do, for the private road ordinance, it was necessary to update the zoning ordinance to allow for the access issue. So it was all part of the same kind of direction.
It might have been the same direction, but they didn't have anything to say with it, and this is what we pay them for every month.
Right.
That's what he's saying, do A, they also modify B.
Yes, but they should have modified B and C before they got there.
Anyway, the planning commission doesn't have jurisdiction over the private road ordinance, but in order for the private road ordinance to be updated, that's why you guys undertook that. And I think we had been clear about that all along.
Right. No, I remember that. And we don't tell the board what to do. We make suggestions. They decide what to do.
Yeah, but you didn't make the suggestion, some
That's-
guy in Ann Arbor did.
There were 2 items that we did, and the third item was engineering. We did the 2 out of the 3 here. There was 2 changes that had to be made in 2 separate ordinances because one fed off the other. The engineering part was a support item to the ordinance that the board dealt with on their own. So that had nothing to do with us. The engineering is the board and the engineers.
Okay, so let me ask you this way. You guys can tell us that we can build such a house this big and that big on a lot. If the board said, if somebody goes to an engineer and he says, oh no, that's not right, we have to put it in there, they override whatever you said. Is that what you're telling me happened?
No.
This is a public comment. so-
Let's move on.
Yeah.
Maybe we can help Bonnie, somebody can help Bonnie explain after the meeting.
Sure.
Another public comment. Mr. Walsey.
Yes, during the master plan update, the discussion from the commissioners, will you allow time for residents to ask and have questions answered due to the significant changes, and there have been significant changes in that section of the document?
Yeah, we usually do within reason, sure. I mean, to answer questions if it Doesn't make sense, we've always done that.
Thank you.
New business items. Salem Hamlet entry signs. Paul, did you want to?
Yeah, so this is, well, it's new business. It's kind of a follow-up to a previous discussion that we had. We were talking about the updates to the master plan for the hamlet. And so we had discussed the idea of creating entry features or signs at the gateways to the hamlet. So I have roughly identified a couple of areas, 3 areas in particular where that might be appropriate. So that would be on 6 Mile on either end of the hamlet and on Salem Road south of the hamlet. And those are identified on that handout that I've given you with the red circles. It was passed out just before the meeting. Looks like this.
Nope. DJ.
From here.
They're coming. One extra, do you have one?
Oh, I do. I've got an extra.
Go ahead.
There should have been enough for everybody.
You want one?
I think this was mine. I think this was mine. Oh, okay.
There should have been enough.
Oh, we're good. No, we need one more.
Dan and I can share.
Here you go.
We got one.
Here's another one.
Somebody's gonna find 3 in their pile of stuff at the end of the night. So we discussed this prior to the meeting about, as we were setting the agenda, just that we wanted to get this ball rolling. So this is really just a discussion item. It's a follow-up to something that we discussed before. In that memo that you're looking at there, I kind of reiterated some of the things that we had previously discussed about the importance of these and why it's appropriate to kind of highlight and celebrate the hamlet itself. And as we're trying to do some of these things to kind of accentuate the character of the hamlet, this is a really easy kind of tool to use. So really the next step would be to kind of solidify the places where these might go. And so I've made some suggestions, and I look for your feedback as to whether or not those are the appropriate spaces. And basically they're kind of at the edge of the development of the hamlet. So in my opinion, that would be the appropriate space, but as I said, I appreciate your feedback. The one on the south end is really convenient because the township actually owns that property. The other areas, we're gonna have to look for potential easements to put something in. And so, you know, this feature could range in size from anything, like as you come into town now, you'll notice there's a little green Salem Township established when, and that's it, right? But if you think about kind of the entries to even some of the newer neighborhoods that you might see, they have, you know, waterfall features or rocks or landscaping. I think that what I would charge you all with is to think about what elements might be appropriate to put into this in terms of, you know, are there iconic symbols or something that are meaningful to the community, that are meaningful specifically to the hamlet, and what kind of elements we would put into that as we start to do some kind of design for those signs or entry features. So you're welcome to discuss that if you have ideas now, or you can take that and mull it over and think about it. We can discuss those at another time. I'd almost like to kind of work with, you know, certainly we've got some LAs on our team that we can put some designs together. I've also heard that there are some folks in the administration who are working with people that they know who are putting some designs together too. So ultimately,
Yeah, I think once some sort of rough draft comes around to present for public input and feedback would be, but I don't see any need for me to do that right now.
What are the actual geographical boundaries of the hamlet itself?
So we, through the last discussion in the master plan, established kind of the outside boundaries, but those go farther out than, what the current developed area is.
Okay, Bob, to make that developed area possibly worth something to somebody, or, maybe there's, I just say, put it on the boundary.
Put it on the boundary.
Or maybe we talk to the neighbor here or something and say, hey, would you want this sign to basically show that you're included in the hamlet? I mean, I'd put it on the actual boundary.
Where are the boundaries?
That's why I started out by asking, I'm not sure where it is offhand,
You
but.
know?
Yeah.
It's not Curry Road.
Well, I mean, the hamlets kind of also coincides with where it would be okay for sewer and water, right? That, not necessarily where it goes to today, but where it's approved to go to, right?
So I think essentially what we did through the chapter 10 is establish the boundary as far out as Chubb Road and Curry Road. So that's kind of the planning boundary for the hamlet area.
Okay, so Chubb and Curry, so it's the whole.
And that's great, that's good
Yeah,
feedback. If that's what you want to
probably,
do, then
I mean,
kind of makes sense.
you know.
Like I said, the next step is, once we establish the places that we would want to go, then we're gonna have to kind of go and seek out the very specific spot, and likely it's gonna be a situation where we're gonna have to get an easement to put something in. Is the rest of the board concurrent with that we wanna go out to the edge of the boundary?
Be outside of the road easement, would it be?
It would have to be outside the road right away, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think where the geographic boundary is, because you can't just go where things are established now. If there's roads, you have to
that's
move the
true.
sign.
I think of entering into a community when you cross a particular road, so, again, the Curry Chubb kind of makes sense.
Okay, that's great.
The
Mhm.
one
What
on
about the south one?
Salem, is that like
Is
a
that subdivision
well-traveled,
just south of the school?
north-going road that we would want to put a sign there?
Paul, is it just south of that subdivision, just south of the school?
So the township actually owns quite a large piece of land.
Or south of the waste treatment facility?
Yes, so.
Down by the waste treatment
That would
facility?
be about the half section line, which is what we established as the border
Okay.
and planning area, so that would be appropriate too.
If there were the speed limit changes and stuff like that, that kind of makes sense too.
Okay. So then I guess the next question that I would ask, and as, is often noted, this is, I'm here to help facilitate the planning, and I'm relatively new to the community, so if there are some of those things that, you think about as planning commissioners or in your discussions with your neighbors and family, what are those things that kind of stand out iconically as Salem? What kind of things would you want to have incorporated into the sign, or what kind of elements would be appropriate? So I'd ask that you get your juices going about that kind of thing, so.
I know just, through Salem Bible Church there, that, we wanted to do a different sign, a new sign, and we weren't committed to, but because the sign had been there forever and a day, we were grandfathered in that we could keep the sign in that location, we couldn't make it any higher, couldn't, really just ended up repainting, refurbishing that sign, so what's the current laws that we're under right now for putting up a sign in the Salem hamlet?
Was that the road commission that, or was it here, Salem?
It was through the township. We
Through the township,
basically
okay.
saying, we wanted to, put up a different type of sign, a little more.
So that's an off-premise sign for the church itself, so it's a sign, I know
Yeah,
it's not a
it's,
commercial.
down here, but it's, unfortunately, it's below
Yeah.
a fence line and
Right.
back far from the road, but that's all it was. I just,
He said we didn't.
So that's
let's make
a
sure
li-
we're not breaking our own rules here by putting something up that says, welcome to the hamlet of Salem.
Hey, Bart, we did approve the sign for the church.
Yeah, but, the next time around, I think it was, yeah, you're right.
We did approve that sign.
Do we-
Either donate it or something for them.
Oh, not the one that's out in front, I'm talking the ones on 6 Mile.
It's on 6 Mile, it's
Same
taped off.
level.
Yeah, no, not the one that's out in front, I know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah. So there are provisions to do those kind of gateway or feature signs that are
Right.
not like advertisement for, I know the church isn't a business, but the church is an establishment, and so the rules that probably precluded you from doing any upgrades there said that you can't have off-premises signs. This is a gateway sign, an entry feature, so it's a different element, a different animal.
I guess it says, as long as we're not breaking our own rules, I like it, but you're not gonna get a water feature
It
past me.
is now.
Is there a need for one on Salem Road?
Is there a need for
I
one?
mean, traffic-wise and everything, I mean, it's not a highly traveled road.
No, but I think the intent is to establish the gateways to the hamlet. So that's why I suggested that area as well. And those are the 3 entry points.
And this is something, I mean, for us to sit and discuss all the details might be pretty premature. It'd be more fun to get some community input on that.
I think it's a great idea, I think it'd be
I
nice.
agree,
just-
I agree wholeheartedly with you just said. Maybe you'd like to utilize the messenger and reach out to the residents and kind of make it a fun thing.
Yeah.
And ask them for their
Little
suggestions.
competition or-
And they could,
Yeah.
give you guys a bunch of suggestions. You can narrow it down to the top 10 and go from there, or something like that.
Find some guy
I-
that's
I
doing
think
it.
that's-
Online or something like that. you
That's a
know?
great idea, yeah.
I reach out to the Salem Historic Society as well. They've got some, what those sales back in the day, between everybody, so.
Thanks, Paul.
Sure.
Okay. Both business items. Master plan, part 10 update. Part 10, I guess. Discussion. Paul, do you want to do your
Sure.
overall?
Yep,
changes?
so we have talked about this before. I brought kind of the framework of the existing plan to you all a couple meetings ago, and we looked at basically bringing me up to speed about the direction you wanted to go in terms of changes that you wanted to make with regard to the hamlet as you, or to the youth urban services district. As you recall, the special, the section of the ordinance, the section of the master plan, excuse me, was part 10, but included both the hamlet and the USD, so all the special planning areas were one. Prior to me becoming involved, we all had split those into 2 different sections or 2 different parts, part 10 and part 11, which I think is appropriate, because each really needed their own kind of dedicated planning area in the master plan. So perhaps the biggest thing that we've done after our previous discussion, I went back and I took the kind of future land use plan for that special planning area, and I updated the land use categories to be more consistent with A, what was going on out there now, and B, kind of what I heard the vision was for the area. So in part 10 now, there is a future land use plan that's a little more of a bubble diagram, if you will. I mean, it kind of outlines the areas, but now because we have some updated base layers for our mapping, we're able to kind of more accurately show not only the boundary of the planning area, but kind of hone in then on the particular parcels and then assign a future land use category to each of them. So that's what you see in front of you here. And I apologize, I had individual handouts of this size that I printed after work today and left in my office. What you saw last time, these handouts that you may still have with you, is more consistent with what was in the existing plan in terms of the future land use categories. And so I'll just kind of walk you through what I've done here, and that's really by and large the changes that we've made in the document and on the map. So we've got 3 different residential categories: low-density residential, single-family residential, and multifamily residential. And wherein before you had the URL1, URL2, which didn't cleanly translate to categories in the zoning ordinance, these do. So these zoning categories already exist in the zoning ordinance, and they're consistent with what I believe your intent was for these districts. So for example, the LR district here would have been the lower density that was conceived in the previous plan, and this is really based on the existing land use in the area. So we've assigned this to this area where you already have neighborhoods that are well established. We don't expect those to change. The intent is to be able to incorporate those seamlessly into this planning area. So LR is the low density residential zoning district, and our future land use category here, which translates to 1 acre lots or greater. And so in these existing neighborhoods, you already have greater than 1 acre lots, and so we don't expect that to change. The single family residential here in the corners is kind of your moderate density, more suburban residential. It's consistent with what we're currently in the trenches here with this site plan. And then these two densities, or these two districts, for better or for worse, are already in a multiple family residential zone, but based on the discussions that we've had, recognize that we would rather see these as single family residential developments, providing a transition to existing lower density residential or agricultural and open space surrounding the district. And then of course over in Plymouth Township, what you're bordered up against is really all of that kind of single family suburban residential. So that would kind of make a better transition here than sticking multifamily out in this corner, which doesn't seem to quite make sense because it's really removed, from your access point to the district, and the same thing over here. And then obviously we want to be more consistent with what's actually being planned down here in this section.
So that upper right-hand corner is a proposed change.
Yes, so right now, it's planned for URL2, which is a higher density. It's not as high density as multiple family, but, so this would be a single family, like quarter acre, actually half acre lots, I believe. With sewer and water, I think they make it down as low as 10,000 square feet. And so then the multiple family, I'll start by saying this. This area here has long been planned for commercial use, and in fact is already by and large zoned that way along Godfredson Road. And I think the understanding or the intent there was that you've got the highway interchange here, and this is where most of the traffic is coming into the township, or will be once the utilities are established here. And so this has kind of long been planned. It was called the Commercial Commons Park before. And so we've talked a lot about the idea that we want to really kind of hone this and create a more concise vision so that when utilities are available in this place and we start to get pressure from developers to come in here, we don't end up, and this is consistent with the language that's already in your master plan, we don't end up with a lot of one-off kind of sprawling, typical off-ramp commercial developments, right? So you go to any off-ramp in America where there's kind of new, you've got greenfield and new development, and you end up with, a gas station, a strip mall, a drive-through fast food restaurants, one after another, and then maybe some big boxes or something like that. And that's clearly not the vision for Salem Township, and this is not what you all want for your entryway. So in fact, we've put together a concept drawing for this area, and my original sketch was a little less intense than what we ended up coming up with. The idea being that we want to see more substantial commercial buildings, something in more of a village type of design aesthetic, something that functions more like a town would or a village kind of atmosphere. So it's really more of a connection to the community itself, and not just a drive-through area for people who are passing by on the highway. So I had our graphic designer in my office take what I put together as kind of a sketch and actually lay it out and use real dimensions so that we could see if it was possible and what it would look like to actually lay out parking areas, to lay out individual roads, which we've talked about a number of times, that instead of having a bunch of curb cuts for individual lots that really are disconnected, we would create side streets essentially for a block pattern that you could then use as your building block to start to put this kind of village or kind of village concept together. And so instead of having curb cut after curb cut after curb cut, we've established this so you end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 basically side streets here. And then you would take your access for the individual buildings and the individual parking lots off of those side streets instead of off of Godfredson Road. So then Godfredson Road can be maintained with the landscaping, the nice big buffer. Potentially we're showing a 10-foot wide non-motorized path in here, and then substantial buildings, more of the kind of village look than your typical stucco. And these are all the things that were kind of conceived in the master plan already, but what this is attempting to do is really hone it and provide a clear vision so that when folks come in and do want to do some development here, we say, all right, this is what we expect to see, and this is what's going to give our community character, as opposed to, the typical sprawling, lost-rate development that you're used to see.
What are the yellow blocks on the right-hand side?
Okay, so that's why I jumped into the commercial piece, because then if you look back at the future land use plan, we flank that with multifamily residential. And so I know multifamily residential can kind of throw up a red flag because you start to think about, apartment complexes or what have you, but really the multifamily that's permitted in our zoning district and that's conceived in the description here are really lower density multiple family units. So while they're attached units, the intent would be that these would be like the kind of townhome developments. So parking spaces and garages tucked in behind, kind of rear loaded, so that then they would front on these same streets that are part of the road network with sidewalks and street trees, and creating a little walkable environment between the urban area or the village area and the residents. And then this provides a buffer from the commercial to existing residential here with the multifamily on either side. And then we're showing a substantial vegetated buffer along the backside here as well to provide a little extra. If you flip through your packets, I think the second page after you see this, there are a couple of images there. Yep, so the bottom one, 1010.
Yep.
Sorry. The bottom image there is kind of an example of the townhomes that we're talking about. So they'd be connected, there may be a number of, I think we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 connected, but
I was just gonna see if Augie had an extra one to kind of show these guys what you were looking at.
here, I've got another. Who are them?
Oh, I just thought,
Sure, these
these
guys.
guys.
Yeah. You want to pass that around? So again, when you see multifamily, I guess it can throw up a red flag that it's going to be, intense or some kind of high-rise apartment complex, but that's really not the intent here. This is really a lower density attached unit. And so you can see from that picture there that these are more like townhomes, couple stories, maybe 2.5 stories, with a door to the street. And so really kind of engaging more with this commercial atmosphere. Bart, I see you've got a question.
No, it's not really a question, just a general comment. Like, I think a good way to delineate going from any commercial or shopping district or anything like that Actually, I think as you go from commercial to shopping area, like walking streets and things like that, to residential, the less geometric it looks, the better it is. And I tell you, every time I go through it,
The road network, or?
yeah, and every time I go through it, I just get more and more, I personally wouldn't want to live in a place like that, but I get more and more impressed with the way they laid out this whole Cherry Hill Village. They started with farm fields, grids, squares, but yet you go through there and it's broken up and you don't have people looking straight out their front yard, looking into somebody else's type of thing. They angled it and arced it and, some 90-degree intersections and some things just kind of waving through there. And I think it's a shining example of something that, we can kind of look at doing as you look at doing something, as developing something like this. And you make it a requirement that says, you just French curve stuff in there? No, but there's the encouragement. This is the yellow is what I see in China all the time.
In China.
Oh my gosh.
Well, this is
one bang, bang, bang. It's like dominoes.
Yeah, so this is very much less intense than I think
Yeah.
what you're seeing from this aerial image, and that's why I threw in the graphic there. So you can see that these are really kind of much less intense than that. Part of the problem with this is we're dealing with limited space.
Yeah.
And so being able to do kind of those long curvilinear streets, it may be possible. The real intent here was the commercial element first, which basically you've got a block, and these are set up on like 350-foot blocks, which are very small, very walkable, kind of village, urban block lengths. So it looks intense, it looks pretty big from this layout, but at the end of the day, these are really kind of much smaller, more intimate kind of block lengths. And
Yeah, it wasn't a complaint, it was just a comment. just
no,
a
I
thought.
feel you. I want to make sure that that's clear, and really the reason that we have put forth this is based on what I'm hearing from you all about what you would and would not like to see, more specifically what you would not like to see, and coming up with a vision like this so that when developer X comes in and says, okay, we own all this land and we're ready to put, CVS, Taco Bell, whatever the typical strip is that you might see at any exit on the highway, that we're really aiming for something that's going to stand the test of time. And so we can actually see in some examples where these buildings are not built for one specific end user, because when developments are built that way, if that end user goes away, goes out of business, what have you, then you're left with basically an obsolete box that was built with their particular branding, et cetera, and isn't reusable. Wherein, if you have kind of more of the downtown, the little communities around Southwest Michigan, that you see these cute little downtowns, they've got a couple story brick buildings that are then repurposed for another use and repurposed for another use and repurposed for another use. They can kind of stand the test of time better than these kind of ethos one-off type of building units. And we're creating plazas and we're creating sidewalks and we're really kind of, so that was the intent or the attempt of what we tried to do here. I know I'm kind of explaining a lot, but I know that this is a big jump from maybe what we're used to seeing in planning or, with the basic land use plan. But I think that this is really what we need to do to get out in front of what might be coming as soon as that water tower goes up there.
I think we talked a while back about having a little centrally located area, maybe a clock and some benches and whatnot, to kind of give it that upscale look.
So again, this is a concept plan.
Right.
But we did put in this green space here is basically like a park area with a nice kind of main entrance coming in with buildings on either side. So you could end up with your clock tower right here at the end of it.
Okay.
And then we've also done a couple of things here on either end with roundabouts. Obviously, we have to work with the road commission or anything like that, but the intent being that you've got, this highway interchange, you're gonna have a lot of traffic coming through here. We've done what we can to cut down curb cuts here, but, so this would be like your jumping off spot. And then we have a street that would provide access to what will eventually be residential over here, and then to this area, which is currently planned for ROP, but we're showing it as business park, and that's the last element here then. And the updated plan is taking the residential office park and the research and research applications, which by and large, from a design and development concept as they're described in the existing language, are really just looking for a campus atmosphere for business park uses that are by and large free of nuisance to neighbors. And so I think what we see is in many of these parks, they're, the newer developments that you see, even some really light manufacturing tends to not be very nuisance producing. But the intent is to be a little less prescriptive about what the particular uses are, but be prescriptive about how they function, how they look, and how the neighbors will feel about them because of their lack of nuisance.
Once again, just a kind of a quick comment of, I guess, observations. If you go back to the previous.
Yep.
One of the things that I think has really hurt South Line, and one of the things that, on the opposite end of the spectrum, what I think has really made the villages like Northville and the city of Plymouth really nice is, if you want to go into it, you go into it. If you want to go around it, you can go around it. So we're talking about an entrance here, and hey, I don't want to go through the center of town and all these crosswalks and all these people that want to go and foot shop. If there's a way that something like that could be designed that you get around it, if you're just getting off there with a truck, you don't want to go through that residential. And if someone's coming out of one of these higher, not these townhome areas, and they just want to get on the highway and go, they don't necessarily want to go to this main artery and go through all these roundabouts or stoplights and these people walking across, with their dogs or whatever. I think, it'd be interesting to see if there's a way we could do that, the way that could be done. It's just, seriously, you go to Plymouth, if you're in the Triangle Plymouth, you're right there at the Penn Theater or at the Box Bar or something like that, the traffic there is intentional for being there. Mm-hmm. If you just want to get around Plymouth, well, you're busting down Ann Arbor Road, or you're north up on one of the mile roads or something like that, just getting around. And I think something like that planned in the beginning would be fantastic. And was there ever any hope for South Line? No, Pontiac Trail just gutted it because there wasn't any real way of doing that, but it's certainly, I think, something that if you looked at South Lyon, they'd say, wow, we wish we could do something like that, make that center the walking district,
Yeah.
and not have just the general people getting to work and commuting traffic going through there.
Yeah,
So,
and I appreciate your sentiment.
here,
I think that
would
we're
be
trying to
great.
do a little bit of best of both worlds, so that your walking traffic and that kind of thing would more likely be on the side streets. And that's why we've limited the number of curb cuts, like you talk about South Lyon, for example. And one of the reasons that the traffic is so difficult there is because every business along there has a curb cut, right?
Yeah.
And it's only one lane in each direction, and so it really.
We have a running joke about making a left in South Lyon.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why we put the roundabouts on either end to keep the traffic running smoothly, and we've tried to limit the curb cuts to really just those kind of 4 or 5
It's kind of like
intersections.
a design follows a purpose.
Mhm.
Your goal is this, the design is conducive to that. So be careful not to start with the design and state that it supports your purpose. Do you understand?
I follow what you're saying.
Yeah, if your purpose is get traffic around, then do it. Don't say this is the design and it gets traffic around.
Well, I think that
That
we,
type of thing.
I'm suggesting that
We're-
we've taken that into account, or we're thinking, we've got that in our mind, and that's one of the biggest reasons why we've tried to limit the number of curb cuts, why we put the roundabouts on either end, because those are designed to help traffic function smoothly and quickly through those areas, while
Well,
that's sacrificing the.
So you
the set.
can't do anything to go around or make anything curvilinear?
Like a
or something?
bypass?
Business loop, a Salem business loop.
No. But,
Paul, I think this is a good first step in being proactive to set the parameters for a first-class development. I think one of our fears has been in the past is to let this go, and then when the developers come with their strip malls and everything, then we're up here debating all that right now. This is the beginning of setting the parameters of a first-class development, and one that has cohesiveness. In other words, you don't have hodgepodge buildings all over, like you said, a Wendy's and a donut shop and, you know, whatnot, a gas station, you know, I mean, and that we have like the land set aside for a clock tower, or maybe a little gathering place and whatnot, gives it that upscale, first-class type development. I think that's what we're trying to arrive at. And this is really a good foundation to start that process. I feel that this is really great. We're getting somewhere. Because we've talked about stuff and haven't really taken any action. And glad to see that we're taking action with the Hamlet and with the USD.
well, and I appreciate that. This is a first step and really, you know, an attempt to get this concept in front of you all to start talking about it, so I do appreciate all the feedback.
I think it's a great visual to, as you said, give us the first step and try and put some vision to, you know, some pictorials to the concept of the vision. As it relates to the bypass there, I see a potential opportunity to, on the backside of that, to create a bypass. You got that one main road there, you swing up to pick up North Territorial. Because most of that traffic is, if it's gonna try and bypass through, it's probably gonna go up to North Territorial and head west. Or somewhere up in the town somewhere, but if I'm going up in the town, I'm not opposed to going through, because I think I can picture where you have that main cut road going through there, is those storefronts are not necessarily walking in, the parking is from behind there, so that they're more or less, the window, the display window storefronts that we're driving through. I've seen those in communities now where you literally, the storefronts are, you're driving past them, but you're really not accessing the storefronts through there. There's a small spot in Ann Arbor Trail, and a few other places, or Ann Arbor Road, and a few places like that, I've seen those, and I think that makes sense there. You can still cut through there without worrying about a lot of foot traffic going into each of those little shops and whatnot. So I think it could be made to work with a little bit of
Well,
effort.
On the other side of it, there's the balance. If you put a bypass and people have a storefront there and say, well, I don't want to bypass, I want the people to drive past my store.
That's exactly
You know,
right.
why do I want to lease this space if all the traffic goes by? So it really is, you know, do I know the secret formula? Heck, no. Do I know how to convince and maybe just throw out things to think about, you know?
Well, I just said there's
There's
an
not-
opportunity there.
It's like,
Goffredson's the main road, there's no other road nearby. And that you've mentioned the side street, you know, approach where they would, if they wanted to go into the development, they would go in off of Goffredson Road. People coming off the expressway are gonna wanna go down Goffredson Road to head north. You know, I mean, I don't know how you avoid that. Could put a road around the project, but I don't know what that would involve, you know, that would be pretty, and would people use that without going down Goffredson? I
So
think the first
Would you go to the
inclination.
east?
I mean, the experts that I know who are kind of economic development, you know, downtown, small town experts say that you don't want to put a bypass in because that will kill your downtown. So that's when you're dealing with these existing downtowns. And as Bruce was saying, yes, the intent is that the flow of traffic would go on Goffredson and it would be allowed to flow pretty well unabated. You can still see all these shops and the development there, so that the folks who want to go there or to peel off traffic can turn right into a side street park and, you know, easily access those things as easily as they might with any of those kind of more auto-orienting areas. So that's kind of the trick that we're dealing with now as we're developing these new areas, is trying to figure out how we can make them both efficient for those folks who are passing by, but then also make it a pleasurable experience so that instead of just being anywhere USA, it's actually a destination and something we can be proud of as a community. As far as finding a route to go east around, because of the existing development in that area, I think it would be very difficult to do anything like that, and we just end up sending the unwanted traffic into somebody else's neighborhood. I don't know if that's
That's
something that we're really
what
trying
I
to
was
do.
concerned of when we started talking about going west.
Yeah.
You know, that's-
The bulk of the traffic comes through pass-throughs, because I live on Curtis, and it's 3:30 on until almost 6 is just one car right after another going northbound.
Yeah,
And then in the morning, it's all going southbound, and sometimes it backs up to the top of the hill by Sue Bajan's house from Pontiac Trail, North Territorial and Curtis. And so how do you get them people? Nobody's going east really on Territorial. They come to Old Territorial and they go that way to get into the freeway. Their point is to get bypass 23 and 14, the accident-prone area,
right.
and they come through the pass.
You can, off of Napier
So when you
Road,
do this, it's gonna be hard for them people,
there to have-
but they're pass-throughs. I mean, do we have to worry about?
That can be
You
a
know?
way of
Well, I mean, from a
bypassing
traffic
that way, just
standpoint,
going
from
straight to North
the
Territorial.
standpoint of folks who live here and work here and want to be able to drive on the roads unabated, yes, we do have to be concerned about it, and I think that's why we've thrown in the roundabouts, because those are
Mhm.
intended to keep the traffic moving. When you talk about those backups, the four-way stops in the morning and
Yes.
evening, I mean, it's probably difficult to get out of your driveway otherwise.
You sit there.
Uh-huh, yeah, and hope somebody will let you
See,
know.
South Lyon's intent was to use Griswold and Dixboro, but that hasn't really panned out because they're too far apart, I think, to go around South Lyon. You see them using it, because certain days of the week, I'll go up Tower Road to 8 mile over up to Griswold and go up Griswold either 10 or 9 mile to stay away from Pontiac Trail because of all the curb cuts.
Mhm.
And that, of course, Dixboro hasn't been done between 8 and 10. That's still a dirt road, not many people take that route. So South Lyons, the layout is kind of, I would hate to see it happen here. And of course, you could really put aside an eastbound, a road down the eastern end of the development because nobody goes that way. It'd be a useless road, I think.
Several years ago on Napier Road, coming off the expressway, they built up all the earth to floor a ramp, to put a ramp in, entrance and exit ramp off of Napier Road, which is only, just down the road from Godfrey's. And someday, probably in the near term, that's probably gonna have a on and off ramp there. And that would be a bypass if that was to happen.
Yeah, it would also bypass everything that we want them to go through.
Well, I mean, I think you said it's gonna be a destination, we hope. So people are gonna be aware that that's there, and if they wanna go there, they're going to go there. And I think you're still gonna have a lot of traffic in the interim. Your traffic's gonna come down backwards, and they're gonna be able to look on both sides, and they got the side streets, and if they wanna turn off and patronize whatever's there, they're gonna turn off and do it. And people are, pretty aware of what's going on, I think.
What would be the thoughts of I don't know what the initial plans were, I can't remember, of him making it a boulevard. So literally, you can't turn left, you can only turn right, either exiting or.
Yeah, so, I don't know, that, limiting left turns might be a possibility through this area. Any of the intersections, any of the road improvements are all gonna have to be vetted through the road commission.
That's certainly a way to just, hey, you coming out of the driveway and you want to go to the store there, wait, go down to the traffic circle, please, or come back around and
Mhm.
come down again. It's not like it's like a quarter mile straight. Thank you for doing this.
Sure.
The South Lyon problem is that their businesses are right on the road, they can never widen. I mean, I think if that area was wide enough to accommodate, a couple lanes of traffic and either boulevard or a turn lane, then it would be easier for traffic to just flow quickly back and forth, and that the majority of the businesses would probably be off of half, I'd say there'd be some, and I really like the parking, how the parking is hidden in the center.
I think, you know, Wayne, you're probably familiar with when some of the other developments were going to come in, there were some proposals about widening roads.
Oh.
North Territorial, Goffredson Road. So you probably have some insight on that.
If I can make one suggestion, I can't speak to the business owners that are currently there, but back in the day, their concerns were in regards to the boulevards were that it would take away significant frontage from their property. And I think, you know, obviously they're concerned about it. And for example, Carl's Cabin there would take away a lot of their parking lot. So, Darrell, you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
You were part of all that
Yep.
discussion. So, again, I would encourage that you make these people aware of these proposals so, you know, they can get their input on that as well. And I'm not speaking for them, but I just remember that discussion at that time.
Yeah, so with regard to the roadway, obviously there are some existing businesses there, but in the area that we've shown here, south of Old North Territorial, or south of Old Territorial, by and large, you're dealing with a blank slate. This is all land that's either not developed or, you know, could stand to be redeveloped potentially. Some of the existing homes, I would suspect that once things start going here, the value of that land would be more valuable to the owners than the home they have there. So to TJ's point, yes, when we start looking at development that comes in, we want to be very strategic about what we do with the roadway and the road improvements. And in fact, we want to put that cost of doing the upgrades onto those developers who will be coming in to develop their portion of it, consistent with whatever future plan we have in that area. So, there's still some, a little bit of fine tuning to do with this language. One piece that I did not discuss yet in terms of language in what we've talked about is the preservation lands. So I owe you a little bit of language about that. But essentially, as we've discussed before, you know, we want to make sure to the greatest extent possible we preserve the existing natural features, the woodlands and the wetlands. And in fact, we can use those for buffers from some of the development and also use them as potential recreation areas with pathways that may extend and connect to some of the other pathways that are being conceived on major roadways. So that's kind of where we are with that. I appreciate everybody's feedback and happy to answer any other questions or provide more discussion, or we can move on.
It was great. It was really good. I appreciate the input and the effort you put into that. Good job. Really great start.
Great.
Thank you, Paul, everybody. 8. Reports of commissioner and correspondence.
Oh, did we have, I thought we were so.
When we get to the comment section, I thought we could get to that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, because I'm curious what you guys think about what you saw. TJ? Oh. ZBA, Darrell?
Nothing for the ZBA.
Okay. Land preservation?
Nothing new.
None. Well, actually, my only comment was going to be to, when we get to the public comment, I'm just curious as to what you guys thought of what you saw, or, you know, it's just kind of it was a first look. So, number 10, approval of the minutes, October 16th.
Make a motion to accept the minutes from October 16, 2017 as presented.
Second.
All those in favor of approving the minutes of October 16, 2017, as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Minutes are approved. 11, public comment. Linda?
I have just one question for Paul over what's been proposed tonight along Goffredson. Does that take into consideration the current PUDs, the current development agreements that the township has with Salem Springs LLC.
Are you talking about the Salem Springs residential in particular?
No, that there exists from a much previous action in 2006, 2008, development agreements with Showstack that provide for 391,000 square feet of retail space on the northeast side of Godfredson in the expressway. And I want to know if what you propose takes that development agreement into consideration.
This is more of a vision based on the discussion that we've had with the planning commission to date. As far as a particular agreement, a development agreement, if it's a commercial land use, is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, 391,000 square feet of commercial development. The only reason why I bring it up is I like the plan. I think it looks good for the township. But we already have on the books a development agreement signed by Salem Township that allows for that commercial use for retail. If you go there, if you go right now, on Godfredson Road is a sign where you call Showstack if you are interested in retail space. There's also one on M14. And I just think before we get too far into planning, we probably have to take a little bit into consideration that this already exists as an approved use by this township.
So I do appreciate what you're suggesting. Basically, I have left that area north of 14. It's currently being called the residential office district, I believe.
No, there's, Paul, there's several different agreements.
The north side.
There's one that runs on the east side of Godfredson, the north side of the expressway. From the expressway to the township-owned property, if you know which parcel that is, right at the end of Old North Territorial. In that section, Salem Springs LLC has approval for now again, it's not final approval, but they have the zoning for 391,000 square feet of residential, commercial.
I basically haven't touched that area.
Okay, so yours was all south of the expressway?
Nope, this is north of the expressway.
Well,
But fronting on Godfredson.
But that's what we're talking about, sir.
Well, I don't think so, but maybe we can talk about that
Yeah.
at a
Is it,
different point.
the area that's marked Business Park right here?
Yep.
That's the sign you see when you're, before you get to Godfrey, if you're going towards Ann Arbor, before you get to Godfrey Road, you see the Showstack sign.
Showstack has the approval that you've worked with on residential. They have one along the north side of M14.
One approximately here.
It's a big piece.
Right.
Yeah, there's one right here too, at the last farmhouse, where that little
On
house,
this
the
side.
Alexander home.
That's
They-
part of it.
Like, you're talking about this area here, right?
No,
No.
I'm not.
You're talking about this area here?
No, I'm
It
not.
goes up to
I'm
the,
talking about this area here.
all the way up to that.
residential.
No, this area here.
No.
Right here is, there's 391,000 square feet
Shopping
of
center.
retail. There's actual conceptual plans. In fact, I think if you go to Showstack's site, you can actually look up the conceptual. I can, give me your email and I'll email it to you because I haven't.
Does it look anything like this? Hopefully they'll acquiesce to
I
this.
don't
'Cause I
think
think
it-
this
I
is
don't-
probably a
yeah.
better plan than what they have.
No, it doesn't look like your plan, but that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying is they haven't approved.
Yeah.
Sure. Larry, there's no specificity. They have the agreements on developing that area and everything, but I know that there are discussions and everything going on, that there's no specificity as to what that's gonna look like. That's part of our effort now, I think. I think that, the engineers and the planners and some of the people from the township have had discussions with Showstack that we want to move in this direction. I mean, no specificity, nothing's been agreed to, but I think that's what we're trying to do now, is we're trying to set the parameters here in the township so that we can negotiate with the developers. That's the whole intent.
There is an approved development agreement that does have conceptual plans.
Yes.
It does have a conceptual layout for what the retail space looks like, where the parking is, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that they're not amendable to what you're
Yeah,
suggesting, but I'm telling you that there's an acceptable plan
Mhm.
already there, and I believe at one point you could go to Salem Springs website and actually look at it. And it is along Godfredson Road. We're not talking about the piece along M14. We're talking about something
Sure, I
that dates
understand.
back to 2006. And it seems clear to me that some of us in the room are familiar with it, but I think that you guys should all, including Paul,
Yes.
become familiar with that, just make sure it dovetails with what you're
Sure.
doing.
Yeah.
Do you think we
Before
could
you
just
put
bring
too
that
much
into,
work into it.
But there's
just
no-
bring that into the next meeting and just go over
They
it
own the
on
land.
side?
It
I-
is, it is
I-
clear that they own it, and it's clear that the area is already zoned
Yeah,
commercial.
and the
so-
township
Yeah.
has two different development agreements. One is for residential at Napier and North Territorial, and one is for retail at Godfredson, from the township owned piece to North Territorial, and they're on the books.
But
and
there's a
they're-
lot of meat to put on the bones.
And
It's
you know,
almost
that's
like,
that's fine,
Yeah,
but the
that's
point, the
Yes.
point she's saying is
Is
there's something,
let's do
just one
diligence
second.
and make sure we know where we stand with
There's,
what's already
there's no
happening.
Yeah,
preliminary
yeah,
site
it's
plan.
great.
I agree, there's no
final
problem
site
with
plan,
that.
But there is a conceptual site plan has already been approved by the township. That's all I'm saying, is I
Right.
think
Right.
it's worth your while to
Okay,
look, because
we'll take-
I
we'll
like
check it
what
out
you're
for sure, yeah.
doing, and I would hate, you move
No,
down that
absolutely.
road and then
Yeah,
all of
we're,
a sudden
just because
we
we
can't.
presented this tonight doesn't mean, okay, that's what we're doing.
No, no,
It
that's
was
it.
a
This is-
first discussion, but these are the things that I'm interested in,
Hey,
to
Paul,
the thought
just for
process.
grids, any guesses to how many square
Paul-
Took
feet?
the words out of my mouth, I was gonna.
Well, it is, this gentleman here looked it up, it is on their
In
website.
part.
Gotcha. Okay,
I
well,
think we
I
need to look
appreciate
at
that
it from the
information.
Salem perspective as opposed to just the, to see
Right,
what
exactly.
legally we have, because we see signs and stuff all over the place that really
yeah.
may not be
Yeah.
valid.
I know on North Territorial Road in Napier, we don't want to see that many homes going in that corner. So we're gonna be trying to negotiate on all of that, I know that. So a lot of stuff isn't set in stone. There are concepts and all of that, and, you know, but there's no specificity, easy for me to say, attached to any of this, and there's been no negotiations going on on exactly what's going to go
Well,
there.
I think we need to find out.
Yeah.
We can talk about it
Yeah,
forever,
I'll-
but we
I'll
need to
certainly
find out.
look into it.
Okay, Mr. Horton, you had a comment?
I brought it up before, and maybe we should think about it again, is there's gonna be 6,000 to 8,000 jobs off the 5 Mile in the Plymouth area, and you've got Ridge Road that's gonna go right down to Territorial, over, and then go right straight to Galveston Road.
Mhm.
So those people are gonna have to get to work in the morning, not all of them, but they're gonna put more pressure on our roads than we've ever had before. Because they're not all gonna go down towards the east.
Yeah, you're right.
So they're gonna go the easiest route, which would be Galveston.
But I think, you know, what I was trying to
That's
say
a two-year
is we're in the
program.
process of getting our act together. So when we do get into the negotiations, that we can say, hey, look, this is what our plan is. We've done it already for Salem Springs.
Right.
We've given 2 years' worth of input to them and made all kinds of changes. And even though they had the ability to go in there and develop that property. So that's just where I'm coming from. I mean, we need to do what we're doing. And I agree with Linda, we need to look at what's been done in the past and see if there's anything there that we should, that we should be alerted to, that maybe we need to say, wait a minute, we don't like this piece of it or that piece of it, let's see what we can do about it, you know. That's all I was getting at.
Like he said in the morning, Curtis Road is loaded. Well, it's
Yeah.
gonna be even more the township is gonna be even more loaded
Mhm.
after that project goes in than we've ever had. And we only got 2-lane road coming off the expressway. That's gonna be, you're gonna be paralyzed there during rush hour.
I think it's important that, not just we, but we as a community, think about this.
Mhm.
I mean, it's been presented. Think about it. These are the things that need to come out of the woodwork and work its way through the process to bring these up. And the community, we've had more. But when this comes out, we'll try to certainly advertise so people can get a chance to think about it and bring up some of these issues to look at. So, Bruce, did you have?
A good point was brought up, and I do want to ask that question, and unfortunately, the road commission's not here to address that, and I don't know what we can get out of them, but, I'm feeling like our township is like a pass-through for South Line, if this new development comes in, we're gonna be nothing but a bunch of pass-throughs, and that, that's not, we wanna be a rural character community, but if everybody's just driving through our town and clogging up our roads, that we have to pay for half of the fees to get the roads, particularly the ones that are getting clogged up. Is there a way to, this development might be just the thing that will, again, people are very ingenious. They figure out ways to go, and if it's not a fast way to go, they're not going that way. So are we missing the boat by not having the stuff established and working with the road commission and things like that, so that maybe we do stop people from just cutting on through our town because it's convenient and faster because the freeway's clogged up with an accident someday or whatever. And then they forget that, I've heard it said before, they when the roads were shut down in '96 when construction, they started passing through Salem, and they decided it was a nice drive, and it moved fairly quickly to a degree, so they stopped taking 96 in the flood and stayed on the pass through Salem. And I'm not sure that it should be taken into consideration with this whole thing.
Well, I think that once, we're working on the hamlet and we're working on this USD, which is obviously the big one. But then when we're done, before any of this is all said and done, we do need to look at our community as a whole.
Right.
So that will be certainly a step we need to include.
Like what Bob said about the development over on 5 Mile. Can you imagine what's gonna happen through the township even? That'll really increase. So getting the stuff in place on the hamlet to have, traffic slow down and whatnot will inhibit some of that pass-through traffic coming through here.
Mr. Walton?
Thank you. You spoke a number of times about the concern about the traffic flow in that area. And you said yourself, Chairperson Merlo, you don't want to see the traffic go west. So we'll have, I'm assuming because you wouldn't want to see it have a negative impact on the rest of our community. And I think it's a given for a long time now. People have said that the people that are in our area, including myself, have basically been sacrificed that area so the remainder of the township can remain rural. So we have an existing residential neighborhood that I live in, and the concern I had in the past was, and I thought you addressed it, but the wording in here does not support that, was in the low-density residential district that's now conceptual, that was the URL 1 district, there was a number of private roads and streets that access that area off of North Territorial and one off of Napier Road. And Mr. Montagno originally said that he suggested possibly using one or some of those streets as an interior network into for access into the entire project. And I thought the Planning Commission did not agree with that, and they gave him a directive to not move forward with that plan. But the wording in here is a little bit vague, if I can read it to you, and I still think it alludes to that. It says, plans for new development within the urban services district shall provide for new roadways or extension of streets to connect with existing or future streets at common boundaries where such extension is determined to be necessary for continuity in the public street system or to provide vehicular access to interior lands. So it talks about existing streets here too. So that could be interpreted that our area as well. And I appreciate the wording in here where it talks about buffering not only the residents within the USD as well as outside the USD from the impact of the USD. So to have the traffic flow come through our neighborhood and connect with commercial, can you imagine having that come through our neighborhoods? So if you guys could put some specific wording in there that would protect the residential district from not having that, that would be greatly appreciated, and I think that's not unreasonable at all.
And that's a good point and why we all need to review this. We certainly want to protect those that are already here.
It also says something in that about the Robinson Road being extended north. On page 68, I think. Of the master plan.
One other comment I had, I went through the document and I read it, and there's some pretty important wording. On page 6, it talks about the complete development within the urban services district shall eventually require the availability of public sanitary sewer and water. It is understood that construction of any future sewer/water system shall be with developer financing. If you go to page 20, it says it should be. So I think there needs to be consistency there. You certainly wouldn't want to put the burden on the township in any way, shape, or form. That would be somebody else's burden to pay for the sewer and water. There's a number of others.
Just real quick, if it just says shall be, that doesn't necessarily mean 100% of it. So I think it probably even needs to go stronger than shall be. It
Better than
should
should.
only be.
Or must be.
Should only, you know, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
But I would read through the document and make sure it's consistent. You don't have any inconsistencies in that regard. And there's a number of other statements that use the word should instead of shall. Now, I'm not an attorney, so I can't tell you whether, should or shall is defensible in the context of that statement or not. But you need to be, read it thoroughly, that's all. I'm sure you have.
Shall is the proper word.
And also in page 17, it talks about in buffering. It says a key consideration in the development of new uses in the USD is the protection of existing residential uses within the USD and surrounding it. And that's a great statement. In the last sentence, and I think it's just an error, but I don't understand it, it says sufficiently dense landscaping.
Dense.
What does that mean?
This typo, dense.
Just dense?
Should
Dense
end in
landscape.
an E.
Sufficiently dense, okay, dense. Okay, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if it was density. Or dense.
What was the first page, just because of my notes, so I can have a checklist here, what was the first page that was said?
Look at page 6 of 10 for shall, and then go to page 20 of the document, and it says should.
Okay.
It's a similar statement. Then on page 15, it says architectural design and building form and orientation in the urban services district should be addressed in a coordinated, attractive manner. I think that's a pretty strong statement. I think it should say it shall be or it must be. You wouldn't want to put any wiggle words in there and allow a developer or anybody a reason to develop it under their standards and not the township, my opinion.
Madam Chair, could I make a request?
Sure.
So, and I think I've mentioned this before, obviously this is a substantial chunk of work that we're taking and updating. And so it's always,
Slightly rough?
Yeah, well, so writing from a blank slate is often easier than taking a document that's already got a lot and trying to manipulate it and rework it to say exactly what we're trying to do. So I would appreciate that anybody, if you've taken some time, Mr. Walsey, to go through and you've got some notes on your copy of the document, if you want to make a copy of that and share it with me, that would be great, because the more eyes on any of these documents, the better. So picking out some of those pieces would certainly help.
TJ has a couple notes here, so she'll share those. with
No,
you.
that's great. And,
She's already
Mostly, yeah.
my
mostly
dyslexia
typos
often
and
gets the better of me,
grammar.
so.
And then forward all the email to you, so that goes through,
What's that?
should they be emailed to you or somebody specifically to send them off to the call? Protocol.
Do you have like a, you have your own email here at Salem, right? Could they email their corrections or
You could
just make copies and give them to them if you've written
Write
it down?
copies and give them to me, you can send them to my email address. I don't know that I have a township email address. If I do, I don't use it.
Okay, so copy.
Or maybe I can figure out how to just forward that to my email. So, yeah, any way you can get them to me is fine.
Okay.
One last thing, if I may.
Certainly.
If I could come up here and show you on the map, I don't have one up here.
Sure.
On the buffering, on the, I don't know if this is a mistake or not, but you put the buffering along here. And I'm sure this buffering is here as a transitional buffering to buffer the residential from the business district, correct?
Yes.
But the buffering extends actually into the residential properties. So you're buffering them from themselves here. Wouldn't it make more sense if the buffering went along the perimeter of the business district here?
So that is, the CE is a conservation, a suggestion for conservation.
Just consider that. It goes right through people's property, the buffering. Why would they want the buffering to go on their property? The buffering should be all along this perimeter.
my suggestion.
Yeah, so the buffer, is actually kind of rough, and we struggled with how to graphic that in, which we do need to do a better job of putting exactly where the buffering should go. The CE is conservation land, and so that would apply to either residential property or commercial property, but we're suggesting that those are important natural features that we would want to protect. So, that's a good point, though, we can clean up the buffering.
Good comments. Anyone else?
I would just like to thank everybody here for such a cooperative effort tonight. It's one of the most cooperative efforts I've experienced on this planning commission.
Augie's not here.
Yeah. It's really nice that we're working together as Salem Township residents trying to make the township better. And I just really feel good about that tonight.
Number 12. Adjournment. 8:46.
Thank you.